40 minutes, actually. This has been an incredible conversation. Let's sum it up because we've got another hour and 20 minutes, and then we're going to be adding another network in. We're going to be adding BBS Radio. We're going to have an incredibly larger size audience here. So this is going to be a continuous show. So let's sum up what we've gone through. The War Powers Act, understanding the country started on a spendthrift trust, and then in 1864, the Tax Acts, and what Rob was talking. So go ahead, Rob, let's sum this up here.
All right. But getting back in with Jennifer, all right, according to the Supreme Court decisions, before she was found in contempt, there had to be a trial to find her in contempt. That is part of the regulations, and there is the law in Ohio and in several other states. In order for you to be found in contempt, you had to go for another judge, another jury, to be found in contempt. The judge can't bang the gavel and says you're in contempt and throw your butt in jail. Again, you got no injured party here. See, this is what we're dealing with out here, and this is why that Trading with the Enemy Act is so important, is that there is no injured party. This is one of the things that I brought up, and the Judge Kessler said here, said, well, Mr. Class, under criminal charges, you're in violation of these statutes under the USC Code and under Washington, D.C. I says, good, let's talk about statute violations. And I started proceeding to explain what the statute violation was on the prosecution side. So yeah, this is where, the Trading with the Enemy Act, with what we're dealing with, we're finding out this is really how they're dragging us in. There is never an injured party. And the reality of it is this, if they were going to do it, it's like these murders that has happened down in Texas, the proper way to do this would be for the state to bring in the victim's family and sit down and says, okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let me introduce you to so-and-so, so-and-so as the victim here, and the state is representing them in this court case. It's not the state of Texas. It is the name of these people versus the defendant in this courtroom. This is how it should be done. This is not how they're doing it. And this was what we're also bringing back in on the fact of the Highway Safety Act, under what Jennifer was dealing with on a driver's license issue, on a tag issue, traffic stop, comes under Title 23 CFR, Section 1250. 40% has to go back to the political subdivision. This is an error because the political subdivision is never mentioned in a county or state court or municipal court. The county is never mentioned in it. The county is never getting their fair share of that federal funding under the Highway Safety Act. This is another reason why there's never a victim, because if there was a victim, then they would have to give the county their share. This is where we need to go to the county commissioners or go to city council, bring an administrative claim in, bring charges against the law enforcement, bring charges against the state on an administrative claim, show where they are embezzling the Highway Safety Act, showing where they're not bringing in the proper parties into the courtroom. And this is what I've been doing here in North Carolina. This is why they're coming back and saying they don't work here. This is why they're saying they're private individuals, because if they were to find them guilty, then they would have to go back since 1968 and pay the county their 40% of what they have embezzled. This is the kicker. This is where the problem's coming in. This is why they're not doing it. This is the reason why they're using the Trading with the Enemy Act, because they don't have to have a victim in the Trading with an Enemy Act. All they got to do is profile you. Oh, you're one of them sovereigns. You're one of them constitutionalists. You're one of them people who think you have rights. So what we're going to do is profile you. So now we can bring you in under the state of the enemy side of this thing, and we can try you because we don't need a victim. This is what this Nuremberg trial was all about, was profiling. They were Jews. They were Catholics. They were Protestants. They were Baptists.
They were Aryan nation.
Yeah, they were old people. They were diseased. They was mentally retarded. They were enemies against the state. They were undesirables. And that's what we're coming into. We're being profiled out here. This is the biggest issue, and this is what people really, truly need to understand. And this is the hardest concept to get across to people until you actually been in here. But to sit down and talk about it is one thing. To show you the paperwork of congressional legislation, now that puts a whole different aspect to this, because now you can see the congressional documents of what they're concealing in these courts. This is the significance of all this. This is why it's so important what we're getting out and what we're exposing.
With this exposed, what do we do next?
All right, what we do next.
Real quick, I got a question. It's one that I've been thinking for a while. Here at New Earth Nation, we support Ubuntu, which is an organization that can go in and replace people at the local mayor's level. Armed with the information that we got from the show, what can local mayors do?
What can local mayors do?
If, let's say, we get someone elected as a local mayor,
all right.
We actually have about several people that are going to be running for local offices for some pretty big-sized town, one in Redmond, Washington, here outside of Seattle, as well as a number of others, people that are set up to run this year and next year as the local mayors.
All right, I'm glad you asked that question, because this is part of what we have been teaching. It's what we've been getting into. If we, us, the people, if we could start taking over these job positions as mayor,
exactly,
city council, county commissioners, if we control the municipality and we control the county, we control the entire government. Why? I'll explain to you why, and I want you to stop and think about it. All these elected officials that are going into public office, what is the state, a state, made up of? Think about it. What's the state made up of? Isn't the state made up of counties and municipalities?
Constituents.
Okay, so there is no such thing as a state. A state is a border of counties and municipalities. So if you control the municipality, and you control the mayors and city council, and you control the county commissioners, you control the court system, do you not?
Correct.
So if you can control the local court, whether it be a municipal court or a county court, and you can control the appeals court, which is the three main courts or two main courts that you can get, because you got three or you got two. If you control the county court and the appeals court, you now can bring charges against the Supreme Court judges for the state and the federal judge in the state for the federal district. You can bring charges against the governor and the legislation. Why? Because where do they live? They live either in a county or they live in a municipality. And where are they doing their damages?
Counties and municipalities.
Now, once you control them two or three court systems, you now can bring charges against a Supreme Court judge in D.C. for corruption. Why? Because they are creating case law that is in controversy of our rights and are damaging us in our municipality. Your legislators. So you live out in Washington. You can bring charges against a North Carolina legislator. Why? Because when he signs that bill, does it not affect you out in Washington State?
Yes, it does.
So this is the argument when I went into D.C. and they asked me, well, is he you're not one of his constituents? I said, excuse me, let me ask you a stupid question here. When he signs his name on a bill in California or out in Oklahoma, does that affect me in North Carolina? Well, yes, then I'm his constituent. The moment he signs his name and it affects me, I became his constituent. So if we would control the county and we would control the municipality, the court system, we control the entire country, because now we could take out the Supreme Court judges, the federal judges.
That's just one county out of the 5,300 counties in the United States.
Well, that would help, but you have to control that appeals court that controls 5 other counties.
Correct, and then you'd also be able to spawn inherent courts of equity in that county, and those inherent courts of equity can feature injunctive orders to stop corporate fiction.
Exactly.
And then the sheriffs on all counties have what? Enforcement.
You can have an enforcement in your county with the sheriff that if the FBI or any federal agency came into your county, they would be immediately arrested, handcuffed, and they would have a chance to sit in a gray bar motel with an outside toilet like you have is sitting on the floor, and they would have the chance to eating bologna sandwiches with dried cheese on it, and they could have a gourmet meal.
That's right.
This is the significance. If we could control the municipality and get our people in and into the county, we'd have to control the municipal court, the county court, and the appeals court, or the county court and the appeals court. We'd have to control at least 2 of the court systems.
So more than likely you're going to need the county court recorder and the county coroner.
Yep.
The coroner is the one that's going to be taking the oaths and the bonds of who's alive and who's dead.
Yep.
And that's where the bonds would come from. So if you have the county coroner, the appeals court, and the mayor.
Well, again, that mayor controls the police department. That mayor controls the city. City council controls the court system, because where does the municipal court get its funding from?
Exactly. Where does it get its funding from?
That's exactly right. Okay, now stop and think about this. If you control the municipality and the county, where does the state get its tax money from?
From the feds. Issuing Federal Reserve notes.
It comes from the county.
For laws that are fake.
The point being of it is, they're hitting the county. The county has to kick in. So if you kick into the state, then the state gives it to the feds. So if you stop it at the county level, the feds are going to have to come into your town. And if you've got your militia set up, or your National Guard, whoever comes into your county, can now be arrested and handcuffed and taken away. And they can be disposed of under the Treading with the Enemy Act, that they don't get a trial until we get a round to it. And I've never seen a round to it.
Amazing.
This thing is just simple. If we could get our people organized to do this, we can handle this.
Well, what I'd like to suggest is for those people that are listening to this call live, or those that are listening archived, to go to newearthnation.org and check out the Ubuntu papers and documents there about supporting for people running at local mayors and local office with the full support of a sovereign community to provide information, a backdrop, how to run, what you're intending to do, how to organize people. We are here to provide the information, tools, and techniques so you can stand in your sovereign power in your local community and do exactly what Rod is talking about, and exactly what Jennifer did, stood in front of a court. So instead of that, you can say, let's find someone that can run for mayor of a small county. It's not that hard. There's 5,300 counties out there.
Yeah, the thing of it is, once you control the municipality, once you control the county, like I said, you control the country. Because even the federal representative has to live in a county or a municipality, someplace in a state. And if you control that county, that public official, that federal rep, has to come home sometime from D.C. And in the meantime, you could confiscate everything he owns, and he has to stay in D.C., because if he comes back to the county, he's going to be handcuffed and stuffed for treason.
Exactly.
And it all comes back to participation in our own governance. That's really what we're about. And one of the things that's very exciting to me as I'm working on this project is setting up some of these e-governance platforms. One of our groups within the New York Nation, and working specifically with us as we get the logistics setting up some of the International Tribunal, we have an e-governance platform set up. So that those of us who really want to get into working on participating, we have a platform so that we can gather and talk about all of these things and strategize and learn how to get more involved in our own governance. You know, we are responsible, whether by our lack of permission or by our acquiescence by silence, that these corporations have been allowed to take over our complete world. And so, truthfully, it's up to us to begin to create the world that we want. And so that's a big part of what New Earth Nation is doing for us. It's getting together those people who are willing to share across all kinds of, you know, we're such a diverse group. Yet under the auspices of New Earth Nation, all of us in our diversity are coming together and saying, you know, we love our country. Let's do something about this so that we begin to take responsibility for creating the world that we intend to live in. And to me, that's the bottom line here.
Well, see, the problem of it is, it wasn't until recently we are discovering the truth. Now, the truth has always been out there. A lot of what we're bringing up, I have found on the internet in old postings. The problem of it is, what I'm seeing is, like you and I have talked, Becky, is you can have pieces, and I'm going to use pieces to a Mercedes. Somebody can have a lug nut and have the 5 lug nuts to each wheel. Someone can have the rim. Someone can have the tire, the brakes, the struts, the shocks, the body. You don't have a car. You may have pieces, and this is what we've had through the Patriot movement. We've had pieces. Nobody's took the time to put it together. Nobody's took the time to take all the pieces and put it in a picture so we can actually see what we're dealing with. This call that we did here today with this Eric John, he laid out a lot of information on the Trading with the Enemy Act, on how the Vatican's tied into this. Now, this is something that this man did. I just got a hold of this information today. But the point is, it is out there. And it's taken us to be willing to come forward to broadcast it and put it out to the people and get us organized of what this is actually what is going on. Because until we really understand the Trading with the Enemy Act, that it was originally set up to benefit us. It was originally set up to benefit us. It was to allow the government to use our property for wartime purposes, and after the war was over, they were supposed to reimburse us for what they used, what they borrowed off of us. They're supposed to reimburse us. But when the corporation got into this, they found a way to swindle and embezzle. And now it's got in so deep for them to try to get out of this, they can't afford to pay the people. So it's easier to keep the crime going than it is to face the reality. But like anything else, like Nuremberg, it was easy to keep the crime going, easy to keep the furnaces going on killing people and burning them. But when it come time that they got caught, now the trial come in, now they're facing war crimes. And that's what I'm looking at happening here in this country. We're getting to that place where we are now exposing it. And if we get the people organized to start taking back the cities, start taking back the municipalities, these people aren't going to have any place to run. They're going to have to face charges. And it's going to be up to us to go do it.
Absolutely. And one of the ways for them to continue to hide the fiction, in 1994, they passed the Regal Community Development Act. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard about it. I'm not that familiar with it.
HR 3474. And one of the things I'd like to bring up, for those people that are available to get this act, they go to Section 260, and you'll see words that are beginning to really change the way. And I'm going to read Section 260, Section 6. Section 15, 15B1, the Securities Exchange Act of 1935, 15 U.S.C. 780B1, is amended by adding the following. The Commission may suspend consideration, deny registration, issue an order, or revoke registration as provided in Section 403. And for the next two sections, they go on and change the 1934 Act They changed the Securities and Commission Act of 1985. They go on and change the Investment Company Act of 1940, the Advertising Act of 1940, the Fair Trade and Financial Service Act of 1994, all for the ability for this thing called the Commission may suspend consideration, deny registration, issue an order, and revoke registration. And I want to talk more about those words, what deny consideration, registration, and suspension, or what that really, really means, that because this is how they keep the fiction going, by denying registration to people like us who are coming out with truth of what is going on with the law.
What I need to do is get into that document, because one of the things that I have found, sometimes when you read these documents, we're not really looking hard at the word, because from what I'm hearing is that they are trying to get rid of registration. If you stop and think about this, under the Trading with the Enemy Act, they required the registration in order to obtain the property. They're starting to get exposed. So if we would start refraining from registration, and they're trying to bring in a lawful government, then we don't need licenses. We don't need registration, because before 1917, registration and licensing was not an issue. It was only for those that were trading with the enemy. It wasn't until 1933 when we really started seeing licensing and registration on our side of the fence in order for them to create that straw man under that birth certificate for them to embezzle. So if they're creating an act now to get rid of all this, they're trying to get rid of the accounts that they set up.
Right, because it ties into flood insurance. This is the actual act that rolls out Agenda 21. This is when you go and look at the letters of the law and everyday change, all of the UN things, all of that is because of this law right here. All the water, and basically they have access to and jurisdiction because through the water system, through the sewer system, through the power system. That's how they have access to your property. That's what this bill lays out. Then there's multiple other laws that modify and change even more.
Well, see, this is one of the things that one of our researchers, Jeanette, she's popped up, and there was a lady named Melissa Sievers. Mm-hmm. She walked into a court, and on a wall was a map, and it had all the underground water lines, all the natural springs. And what they were claiming was ownership on the water. And because of all the natural springs running underneath the ground, this is how they were claiming the admiralty side or maritime of water jurisdiction, because we're on the water, even though we're on the ground, water runs underneath.
That's nuts. And more, the Flood Insurance Act in this guarantees the 2008 scandal that we had, because this is the same law that begins to do what? Backs everybody's bonds for court.
Yep. This is part of the scam that they're running on the American people. The problem of it is all this stuff is being done behind closed doors without any of our knowledge. They're setting this stuff up, and then they're dumping on years later. They're enacting it. They can't do it right away. They've got to put it into place to see how they can manipulate the system and get the people to start running with it. See, this is where the State Justice Institute, the Federal Judicial Center, that's where these people come in, because these are the ones that's training the judges. These are the ones that's training the lawyers on this new information on how it can be misused in these courtrooms.
Oh, yeah, misused. I don't want to go too much into the legal community development. It's something that people need to research. And for those people that are Native American, the first 3 sections, that is for you. That is how they use community redevelopment to hijack the rest of your rights, the rest of your mineral rights, because that's what it's really about. Okay? So it affects anyone that's ever discovered Agenda 21. This is the framework that allows all that other stuff to come in and be here. It's to keep the scam up so that they can do what? Ultimately make the scam even bigger, like a Bernie Madoff, because they can't stop it.
No, the thing of it is, again, this goes back in what we've been sitting here saying. is when they did that 1933 state of emergency and the mandatory act on this, when they stripped the gold off of the people and they created the Social Security Act of 1935 and they put a dollar value on the birth certificate and they created a birth certificate under the Alien Registration Act, we're no longer dealing with gold and silver. We're no longer dealing with oil. We're no longer dealing with natural resources from the ground. The natural resources now becomes the people.
Right, your DNA.
Yeah.
Your court of record.
Yeah, but see, now the problem coming in, if you've ever listened to some of these speeches, especially when they did the bailout, they used a phrase that we are borrowing off of future generations. The problem of it is they can only borrow so much and they get in. So now we got to bring in new blood. So what are they doing? They're bringing in all these immigrants, bringing in all these foreigners. They're going to give them a birth certificate. Now they got fresh blood. They got a new fresh cash crop coming in because they can only borrow so much off of us, and they've reached their limit, and they overextended their credit on us. So now they got to bring new in. And this is why they're bringing them in for credit lines.
That's right. They used us up so much they can't even use us anymore. That we're not even worth the paper that we are represented on.
No, because now they got to get rid of us in order to dispose of us, and that's why we're going through the genocide of all the medication. That's why they're not trying to cure any disease. They're just giving you medication, and every side effect, they give you another medication for the side effect, and each side effect creates another problem. They're not curing. They are dumping side effects on us. And if you stop and think, this is what Germany did. They sit down and did genocide on the people, but we call it medical on our side, and we're finally funding them to give us the
capitalist genocide.
Yes. But yet you'll see on the news or on TV, on a commercial every year and a half, did you take this? Did you take this medication? Well, we now got a lawsuit against this law firm. Well, a year and a half ago, they was promoting it, but they were sitting here telling what the side effects were. And now a year later, a year and a half, now they're going back and suing the company. And it's the lawyers that suing it on behalf of the American people. If you took this stuff, it's genocide. It's legalized.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we have a question here, and it kind of leads into what I was saying. What does the difference that the USA as a corporate state brings to the rest of the equation of 253 corporate states in our world?
What is the difference that the United States brings into the corporation opposed to the United? Okay, again, let's go back into the fact that we're not dealing with the United States as we understand it.
Correct.
We're dealing with a corporation, and see, this is where our
a corporation that has paid the military to do its work.
Yes. This is where the
private contract military too, mercenaries that exist.
Well, they are, but see, the military is under UN jurisdiction.
Correct.
All right. This is the other problem that we have, is that they placed them in. See, we the people, us, we want to believe that the United States, and our United States does exist. Ours does.
We have to occupy it as I am presence beings.
Yes.
We begin to enforce our concepts, which is what the I am documents represent. That founding concept that the I am presence is here in the now, when we only judge people not in the facades and stay play. We don't need justice or judgment. We go through remedy and resolve.
Yeah, because see, we're the government. If you stop and think about it, on November 2nd, they have to come to us. And if we're prisoners, and we are POWs, when are prisoners allowed to vote at any election? So on that November 2nd, for that 12 hours is the only time that we are set free to vote as Americans. That's where the constitutional side comes in to put them into office. And this is part of our concept, because we keep running into our mind, well, I elected you, I voted for you, you're holding a public office, because I remember putting your name on a ballot. That's the deception. That is where we're getting hung up. That's where our problem's coming in, is that we keep going back and thinking that they're legitimate, and they aren't. They don't hold any proper standing whenever they're violating our rights, and we're walking in these courts, and this is something that I proved in D.C., is that they're not following the rule of law, they're not following the Constitution, they're not following our statutes, they're not following anything. They're making this stuff up, because we went back and showed they're not even following an enter of appearance into their own court cases. This is what we brought up with Deborah. This is why no attorney, no judge, no lawyer signs his paperwork. That's always that /S/. That's because they're not signing a contract. You and I have to sign. We can't put anything in if we don't sign it. They will make us sign the damn paperwork. But these lawyers and judges don't sign squat. That's why you got that little slash, and you got that S, and you got that other slash, and that's their signature. And what we found out about that is their certification for their bar card, whenever they sit down and go into a court once a year, they have to sign an agreement that they have been trained to understand their rules of court, their rules of evidence. They know the laws. They have to sign a contract agreement that they understand and pay their filing fees. But they come under that symbol, and it's a violation because Rule 11 says they have to sign it, and they don't sign squat.
Doesn't that same document prevent them from telling a lot of the truth of what's going on in the bar?
Yep.
It's the gag order, too, yeah, because a lot of them know.
Yep.
A lot of them know.
Yep, they do. All of them know. That's part of the training of all this, because we've talked to too many of them throughout the years, and they have admitted quietly to this, but they won't announce it. But Deborah, on the show here a couple of nights ago, Tuesday, she admitted to this. And when I brought up about that /S/ and why they don't sign, because they don't sign the contract, she says, you figured it out. I says, yes. Everything is a contract agreement with these people. But see, whenever you're dealing with a contract under a government side, but when they drag us in, they switch over to that Trading with the Enemy Act side, and they don't have to honor anything. That's our problem. They're playing both roles, playing both sides on this. And that's why it's so hard for us to walk in and fight these people, because they're playing both sides. Al Capone had his good side. He really, truly did. Because Al Capone created the food line. He's the one that fed the people. The government wasn't feeding them. During this time period, he fed them. But Al Capone also knew these were the same people that would sit on a jury. If it comes time for a jury, these would be a jury of his peers. But on the other hand, when Al Capone collected for his insurance, he may have fed them in one line, but he broke their legs in the other line.
Which is the same thing this system is doing to us.
Yes, it's the same thing they're doing to us. They're doing one thing on one side while they're still breaking our legs on the other side. And this is the mob. The mob really taught the system well on how to play both sides of this fence.
And now we can learn from it.
Yes.
The International Tribunal on Natural Justice, people like Deborah, other people that want to be whistleblowers that can go with what /S/ means. There are all sorts of people that will come out of the woodwork when these tribunals are up, because they do understand that they have to stand in their own understanding of what the facade is, what the fraud is being played on the whole world here. Because there are 253 corporate nation governments out there that are all doing the same thing, just in a different language, in a slightly different way.
Well,
yes, absolutely.
But they are. But see, there's one problem here. When they did that Trading with the Enemy Act in this country, and they passed the Mandatory Act of 1933 under Executive Order 6111 and the state of emergency under Public Law 148 Stat C1, What the rest of the world did not know is they became enemies of D.C. just as we, the people, become enemies of D.C. And that's something they didn't realize. They became enemies of the state as well. And they were required to use the Federal Reserve notes. They were required to come under the licensing agreements with this country. So they may have been part of it, but what has been done to them is the Trade with the Enemy Act side has really railroaded them as bad, and they're starting to wake up to this fact. It's just that we, the people, are starting to wake up to this fact. And once the American people wake up and the international people wake up, it isn't us that created the problem. It's that 10-mile square and those who hold up public office that has created that problem. But it's the people. It's the people that we put in. We don't have the government. We're the government. I love our government. It's the people that we put in that are corrupt. But problem is this. It's like Deborah brought up, and it was like Jesse Ventura brought up whenever he became governor of Minnesota. He was taken down to a room and was confronted. He was told how it was going to be done. The biography of John F. Kennedy, whenever he was president, he was taken to the back room and he was confronted. If you noticed that Obama had to redo an oath, and what did they do? Chief Justice Roberts didn't do him out in the public. He took him to a back room. Now, that's the first time in history that we ever seen a president taken to the back room and given an oath, but you really didn't hear the oath that was given to him, and then he came out in the public and took the constitutional oath. They actually showed us on TV that took him into a back room. That's something we didn't catch until Deborah.
No, people caught it. They just didn't understand it at the time.
Yes.
But I even remember the mainstream news media made the mistakes of mentioning it. I'm like, they're giving it away there. Maybe that's what they wanted to do out of innocence and ignorance. Because, again, they're arrogant. They never thought they'd be prosecuted.
Well, I believe Obama, he's playing both sides, I think, of the fence, because if you really stop and think, his last 6 years, he's really been arrogant. And the American people have woke up. And he has forced the people to stop and think. He's done a lot of nasty stuff to the people, but on the other hand, look how pissed off he's got the people.
I want to add it. It isn't him. There are tens of thousands of people that run around him.
Yes.
And it is the figurehead office.
Yes.
Okay? With people that run him as controllers. And yes, the individual person does have individual powers, but the vast majority is brought by the secret government to that president. And he follows what he wants because he has a wife and 2 children. And let's not forget that this is the highest level of the game. Those wife and those 2 children mean a lot to that man.
Oh,
okay. I neither support nor deny him, but what I do say is doing nothing in this 6 years, this time, has been the best thing, because you're right, it pissed everyone off.
Well, let me rebut that, because here in 2002, my brother and I made a trip down to Washington, D.C. with another gentleman. I successfully filed for a letter of marque and reprisal in Congress. I come back to my one court hearing in New Philadelphia. I laid this before the judge with a 1902 Dick Act in 2002. My attorney crapped because when I sat down and told him that we filed a letter of marque and reprisal, he said, "What did you do?" I said, "I went down and I filed for a letter of marque. I handed it to the judge. I told him, you don't have subject matter jurisdiction because Congress stripped you and I have it. I want this case dismissed." Well, the CIA, ATF, and the FBI were dogging me. They hit the different gun shops in the area. Because I was not married at the time, but I was living with a girlfriend, and she knew the gun owners. They called her and said, "What the hell is your boyfriend come in and do a background and start finding out, is he buying anything? We had ATF come in. We had FBI come in. Well, I had their cards, and I called them. Well, the CIA and ATF denied. Even though I had their card, they denied. But the FBI said, well, Mr. Class, no, we don't do anything, but you do realize what you're doing is you could get your family killed. Now, wait a minute. First off, you're telling me you're not hunting for me, and now you're telling me what I'm doing can get my family killed? I said, did you just threaten my family? Oh, no. I said, no. I tell you what, shoot them. Shoot my family. They're Christians. They're going to be in a better place than they are now. And the moment you shoot my family, I will no longer have to do paperwork because I'll give you a 17-cent solution. He says, what's a 17-cent solution? I said, that's what it costs to buy a bullet, 17 cents. I will do for what I was trained in the military for. I will no longer do paperwork. So if you want to shoot my family, shoot them. Do me a favor. Put them out of their misery. Put them with God where they belong. That's the last time I got threatened. So you can't threaten me. You can't use my family. And for Obama and them, with the fact that he has military backing, he's got all this stuff that he could actually use at his defense to take down this cabal, take down these people that could come in and threaten him. No, I don't buy that for 1 minute. And that's the same thing.
Well, who does he trust? If he even wanted to go against the powers that be, where would he start? It would have to be a faction within a faction within a faction within a faction. I'm looking at the mechanics of it, not the politics, not the dogmas. That's what I do. That's my special talent of looking at the mechanics. And in a world of corruption that eats corruption, there's no one person in charge of this world. It's thousands of factions, all chewing on each other, all cannibalizing each other for something. And our system shows it through nepotism. Okay? And for somebody at that level, he got put in that place. He got elected there. He didn't get freely. There hasn't been a freely elected president. I'm fully aware of that. And that also means that president really has no power. And he is a figurehead, yes, that deserves much of the punching bag material because that's what he's here to do. He's here to be on the TV to toe the propaganda line so that the belief system of the facade and the stage actors stays powerful.
Well, they can, but on the other hand, if he was interested on fixing the problem, they do have a place where they could stuff him for protection, and he could turn around and get an elite force, talk to the military staff, that he can sit down and say, okay, we know these are certain areas. We may not get them all, but if we take out a few of their headquarters and we will send them a present through the air, these cruise missiles, then we can sit down and send a signal to the other side, we're not playing anymore. And that's what it's going to take, because...
That's brinksmanship, but I do understand it. And I would hope that we are evolved enough that brinksmanship isn't the first solution.
Yeah.
Okay? Because, again, doing paperwork does make a difference.
Yeah.
The years that you have been doing has brought out tremendous amount of truth and put people in chairs and books and started studying.
Yeah.
And that is more powerful than a gun, more powerful than a nuclear weapon. Your sovereignty and your own wisdom learned.
Well, this is it. This is why we're trying to do the paperwork side of this thing. This is why going through the congressional records, it's not just telling the people, it's actually showing the people. And once you show the people where the truth is at. See, this is one of the things when I went through the interrogation in D.C. for 3 hours and 40 minutes roughly. I kept telling the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, the ATF, and all these other federal agencies, if you will give me my computer, give me my hard drive, I will walk you through the congressional records and I will show you where this information is at. It has nothing to do with sovereignty. It has nothing to do with being a constitutionalist. It has everything to do with that you people wrote it. And I can show you where it's sitting at. And this upset them more than anything is the fact that you're able to go through because they were hoping that I could sit down and say, well, I got this off this guy down the street, or I got this off this guy over here. But when I started pointing out that I got it out of D.C., out of the Library of Congress, this rattled their cage.
Oh, yeah. It's rattled their belief system. It showed them so many times of what they were doing wrong.
And this is the whole thing, and this is why education level of with what we're doing out here of trying to get the people educated, get them knowledgeable. And Becky's right that you don't walk in blind on this stuff, and especially with my documents. If you're going to use my documents, you better be able to walk and talk and explain my documents.
At every angle.
Yes.
In mock trials, many of them, because you do not know all the angles in which they can pull you back into the fiction.
And this is the whole thing. No matter where that judge cries, and this is what we did in the administrative court on the traffic issue that I went in on, is the prosecutor said, well, Mr. Class, or the Attorney General came in and said, well, Your Honor, Mr. Class brought charges against Dallas Police Department in North Carolina, and he brought charges against the DOT, and he went on, and the judge finally told him to sit down. Well, I objected, and the judge sat down and said, well, you're Mr. Class. First off, let me explain to you that they are private contractors. This is good. Let's unite talk private contract law. Because, see, what these people do is when they write their documents, they lay out their arguments before they walk into court. So once you go back in and read their documents and see how they're going to argue this, now you know what to go look up. So when he brought up that they were private contractors, I went back in North Carolina statutes. I pulled up all the private contract law. Well, if they're private contractors, they still have to come in compliance with the state statutes. They still have to come in compliance with the federal statutes. They still have to come in compliance with the Highway Safety Act and all this other stuff. So once we started laying this out, the judge says, oh, well, let me rephrase this. They are a public, they belong to the city office. They are a local government. I said, good. Let's talk about local government, because that was another thing that he put in his paperwork. So I started walking him through the local government side of this thing. I said, you know what I did not see? He says, what? I didn't see the word police department in the local government. I didn't see DOT. Well, let me rephrase this. So every time he rephrased, I was able to walk him through, because their paperwork lays out what their argument's going to be. And once you learn to read their paperwork, you know how they're going to argue this thing. So now you can walk them through. And this is what I did with the tax deal with this thing, when I went after the tax side of this thing.
This was for your firearms case?
No, this is for a traffic ticket.
This is a traffic ticket. Did you get the QSIP numbers on those accounts? Did you already do that in that process, or was that early in?
Well, I didn't go in after that. I just went after their statutory side and stayed here and showed what.
I was wondering if you found out if there was a bond on your traffic ticket.
Well, they put a bond on it, but the thing is, on the administrative side, I charged them on the administrative side.
That's what I was going to ask, because I know there's a lot of people that are starting to flip on the administrative side and put the bond onto the trustee, which is going to be the prosecutor and the judge.
Yep. But when we went in on the tax side of this thing, and again, the Attorney General was in there, and he brought up, well, Mr. Class brought up the 1913 Federal Reserve Act, and I don't have a clue what this is, and I don't understand the 1913 Federal Reserve Act, and he brought up the state of emergency, that there was no money, and he brought all this stuff up, and after he got done, I said, I object to what this man sat here and said. And the judge looked at me, and he said, what are you talking about? So I pulled out two $5 bills out of my wallet. I looked at the Attorney General and said, would you please tell the court what these are? And the judge looked at him and says, don't you say one word, you keep your mouth shut.
Got caught right there.
I said, excuse me, I object. The man
you should have held up a silver certificate and see how bad their underwear shot up their butt.
So what we did, we came back in and said, excuse me, this man doesn't understand the Federal Reserve Act. Obviously, he doesn't understand what money is. So we're trying to show him what money is. And the judge says, look at him, says, you keep your mouth shut and don't you say one word to him. So I looked at the judge. I said, would you please sit here and tell me what these are? He just sat here and bumped his head and shook his head no. I said, you're not going to sit here and answer this? So you don't know what the Federal Reserve Act is either, right? So we're not dealing with money. So how are you charging me taxes on something that you're not recognizing in this court?
And how you charge in court fees.
Exactly
and the same thing.
right. So we walked in through the whole process, and he come back and ruled, well, they are private individuals working on their own accord. They're not working for the state of North Carolina. We got that ruling.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I'm sitting here saying. If once we learn how to go back and read their paperwork, because they will tell you what the argument is. And this is why when I do my paperwork, I lay in the congressional statutes, I lay out all of this stuff, knowing that they can't argue it, knowing it is exposing their entire corruption.
Right.
And we're trying to discourage them from wanting to drag this thing out, because if they ever get me before a jury on any of this, we're going to be able to lay out this entire argument, because under their Criminal Rule 12, it says that they cannot deny pretrial motions that can possibly allow you an appeal on error. So by bringing
I got a question, a hypothetical one. Let's say that judge you were just walking through decided to be sympathetic to you, and he was you. What would you want him to say back to you in truth?
I want him to dismiss the charges and hand me the head of the prosecutors and give me my crap back.
In bond? Like what? In what way?
All right.
To do what with it? I mean, this is the next step here. Let's say there was a sympathetic judge, and he gave you what it is that you were asking for. What would be the next process?
Well, basically, what he needs to do is flat out just dismiss this case altogether. Give me my property back, and go back to the prosecutor, says, you pay restitution to this man, whatever he asked for. And I put it in Federal Reserve notes. And I put in, for false arrest, I was at $500,000 for the first 3 hours, and anything after that, you know,
like
there's a minimum of 3 hours here.
Right, a schedule of fees.
Yeah, and I also went back in. If I was arrested and I was detained, it's $1 million for the first 3 hours and every hour after that. Well, I've been going on since March 30th of last year. So you sit down and figure an hour since March 30th of last year in Federal Reserve notes, I ought to get me an armored truck down here. It ain't worth anything, but it's still Federal Reserve notes. Because
Federal Reserve notes.
Yeah, we didn't ask
go to
for money.
Walmart and use it.
Yeah, we didn't ask for money. We asked for Federal Reserve notes, and Federal Reserve notes is not money. It's a promise to pay me.
I know.
So,
So I got a question. The next question, if you had held a silver certificate right up after that.
Well, if I'd had one, I would have. But the thing of it is, we dealt with the Federal Reserve Act of 1913.
I know, but I just wanted to throw the other side of the medals there. It's an area people should look at. They really should, with silver certificates and gold certificates represented.
Well, the thing is, they have collected them. And technically, you're not really supposed to have them anymore out here. Although some people do. But it's
coin shops have thousands of them.
Yeah. But it's like when I dealt with the FBI down there and we got interrogated. They asked me, says, you don't believe in paying taxes, do you? I said, nope. He says, why don't you? I said, well, have any of you got a Federal Reserve note in your pocket? They says, what are you talking about? I said, come on, you guys got to have Federal Reserve notes. And they all looked at each other. I said, oh, that's right, I forgot. You guys get paid in gold and silver, don't you? They said, gold and silver? I said, yeah. If you don't have Federal Reserve notes, then you got to be paid in gold. How much gold have you guys got in your pocket? He says, we don't know what you're talking about. I says, has anybody got a green piece of paper that's got a 1, 5, 10, or 20, or 50 on it? And the guy pulled out a $5 bill. FBI did. I says, good. I said, now, I looked at the FBI. I said, would you please read across the top of this? What does it say? Read it out loud to all of you people here. It says Federal Reserve note. I said, that's right. It's not money. How are you charging taxes on something that is not money? You're charging me on a credit line. Go get me my computer and hard drive. I will bring up the 1932 Congressman McFadden's speech, and I will show you this is not money. Would you explain how we're supposed to pay taxes on something we don't have? And they said, well, that ends this conversation. They went to the next.
Because they can't argue with it.
That's exactly right.
And they can't even deal with it on an administrative side.
No, they can't. And this is why we're doing the administrative side on this stuff, and this is why we're trying to get people to learn to read the paperwork, because once you learn to read and read what they put in here, they always give you the answer. They tell you how to fight them. They always do.
There's a reason why.
Yes.
Because that prosecutor and that judge know that there are bonds that can be reversed onto them if they don't.
Yes. So
it's rigged against them if you know it.
That's exactly right, and that's what we're doing. So we're coming back in. It's like we got this ruling from a federal judge in Oregon. We challenged the United States codes. He come back in and he put in his order that the United States Code is not law. It is presumed law. And if there's any conflict, you have to refer back to the statutes at large to reference that law. And that's what he come back with. So the USC Code is not law. He said so. So this is what we're driving at. They always give you the answer. And if you learn to read, I had a couple back in 2008 when I did the original Corn Novus paperwork, which was a 4-page document. They filed it into their court case in Florida. They had their kids taken off of them. James went in on Friday, got his paperwork thrown out, and immediately he called me and said, Rod, what do I do? I says, I've got a notice of felony. We put this notice of felony in, and we will put it against the judge and the prosecutor. Well, his wife went in Monday. But she went in, put the same paperwork in. The judge looked at her and said, okay, I want you to explain the paperwork. Well, at that time, I made a cheat sheet for them to use. Well, they started to explain back in Title 22 CFR 9212, 92.30 about their oath of office, that it came under foreign relations. Then she got into Title 8 United States Code under alien registration under Section 1481, where the moment they took their oath, they were required to relinquish their national citizenship. They're no longer American nationals. They're now foreign nationals. They now have to register themselves as foreigners under Title 22 USC Code, Chapter 11, Section 611. They have to register themselves now as foreign agents. And the moment she got that far, the judge shut the hearing down because she just proved he had no authority on the bench because he was a foreigner. So they shut the case down. They came back later, opened it back up. They said, Rod, there's some more paperwork on the child services. Well, they went back through the paperwork. I showed them all the errors. I showed them how to read the paperwork and pick out the flaws what child services put in. Well, they went back into court and they pulled out all these errors where the judge says, oh, we made a mistake. We used the wrong set of laws on you. Well, the child services did another step. Well, they called me back up. They sent it back up to me. I went through and I picked out all the errors and showed how they screwed up. They went back into court. We did this 7 times. They finally got their kids back because the court wanted to quit playing with them because we were showing too many screw-ups and too many errors on their side. So they got their kids back. This is part of what we're trying to teach, part of what we're trying to educate, is once you learn how to read your paperwork, you can hammer the snot out of these people because they have to tell you how to fix the problem. They're just not telling you, they're dragging you in as an enemy of the state. And this is where the problem's coming in. And this is what we're coming back in. We are now hammering them. This is what we're trying to come back in and do. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the only way that we can get anywhere here, empower ourselves, is through the educational process and getting together with our neighbors and doing the kinds of things that we're all beginning to do together. Now, next week, we'll bring in Christina and Jennifer who have dealt with foreclosures. Now, Jennifer and Christina both are still in their homes. Christina has been working on hers since 2010. She had a lawyer who was working with this with her until she filed the OPPT-style paperwork in. That lawyer quit the week she filed the paperwork. So there's some real major clues in the OPPT paperwork that we really want to be discussing more. But the whole thing is then, Christina did not know a thing about how to deal with the kinds of things that Rod is talking about tonight. She didn't know anything. She called me, picked my name off of an OPPT list where we were all on these forums together, got in touch with me, and we have become absolutely sisters over the course of this 8 months that she's been working with this. I was able to put her with the resources through Rod's network, through the anti-foreclosure network, through several different ones that we had them working with, so that Christina then could begin to start learning this stuff herself. So she's going to tell both how she got in touch with the resources, how she learned to handle this as a pro se herself, as she's dealt with this, and then how, as each step of the way that she couldn't figure out how to handle her own paperwork and how to handle all of this, somebody was there to lead her every step of the way. So what I'm saying really is what we figured out with Jennifer, and really love to get Jennifer back in here a little bit more to finish her story, because the biggest part of what we're dealing with here is learning to reach across, use the e-governance platforms, use the New Earth Nations, volunteer to help be a part of all of this so that we can begin to connect with each other to find ways to hold the system accountable. Can't do it by ourselves, can't do it just as our own little island, you know, we're our own nation state, and each one of us is going to have to take that responsibility, but there's so much more strength in numbers. And those groups that are working together are reaching out. It's like this wonderful support group that's there. And so that's part of what we're going to do through the International Tribunal. It's what Rod's been doing for almost 10 years. He and his brother Dwight, you know, Dwight has just, we got to know Dwight as we've been doing this documentary. They've worked together so beautifully on this for all of these years. And then Rod has done his real job in teaching all of us, as you're seeing tonight. But I'd really love to get a chance to bring Jennifer on back in and let her finish telling a little bit more, because she managed to get out of this jail without ever giving her signature. And so before we get away, I'd love to hear the rest of that, Jennifer, too.
Jennifer, go ahead and take away. At the top of the hour, everyone, BBS Radio is going to be joining this call, and we're going to want to welcome them. So just kind of like 16, 17 minutes from now, I'm just going to break in and welcome everyone from BBS, and we'll go on from there. We have an incredible simulcast, New Earth Nation YouTube channel, Rod Class's AIB network, and now we're adding BBS. We are doing it, everyone.